The gastropoda means belly foot. Gastro, like the GVC or the gastrodermis in cnidarians. And poda means foot. This includes the snails, slugs, limpets, abalone, conchs, and many, 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 many others. This is a very diverse group of organisms. And they are bilaterally symmetrical, but with a twist. Quite literally, a twist. Torsion. So you can see that the shell of this snail here and the shell of these other conchs and whelks and organisms like that are twisted in a spiral form. And that torsion is a way of enabling the organisms to grow through time. So as the snail gets larger and larger, the shell will get bigger and bigger to accommodate it as the mantle continues to secrete that shell for it. And the style of the torsion is very indicative of the organism that lived inside of it. So when we find shells like this at the beach and they are empty, or we find fossils, these produce great fossils, have told us a lot about the evolutionary history of life on Earth. There are a lot of different ways that the torsion, the style of torsion, the type of torsion, whether it's left-handed or right-handed torsion, whether it's very elongate or screw-like torsion or very flattened, almost like a cinnamon bun torsion. It's one way that we can identify different species of gastropods. Our third class are the bivalves. And bivalvia means having two valves. And the valves are the shells, or the parts of the shell, of these different organisms. So here we have something like a scallop, giant clams, or other types of clams. So oysters, clams, mussels, these are all different types of bivalves. Bivalves have a fairly sophisticated internal anatomy, including siphons to help bring water into and send water out of between those valves, and keeping water continually circulating through the valves. So they have gills, the bivalves do, that enable them to go through, to have gas exchange, keep oxygenated and remove carbon dioxide. They can use them also for feeding and for brooding or reproduction. Now, one example of a bivalve would be the giant clam, which kind of looks like this guy here in the middle here. Tridacna giganteus is a very, very large clam. It can be up to 1 meter across. And people tend to think about them without really knowing much about their biology, and they're like almost afraid of them because they see them when they're diving and they think, oh, if I go too close to that, it's going to close down those valves and trap me like a bear trap. But an organism that large can't really move its valves very quickly. And often when they're open like that, they're not trying to lie in wait for a large prey item to fall in. What they're really doing is they're taking advantage of symbiotic algae, zooxanthellae, that will photosynthesize for them and feed them in exchange for a place to stay, habitat. Here we can see an image of the internal anatomy of a clam, for example. You can see it's got these siphons that are right next to each other, an in-current siphon that brings water in, an ex-current siphon that can shoot water out. They have these gills, which help exchange gases, help keep it oxygenated. They have a coelom, or a fluid-filled body cavity. They have a circulatory system. They have a heart. They also have a complete gut. They have a mouth and a gut and an anus, a complete gut. They also have their mantle, which is how they make their shell bigger and bigger, is the mantle secretes the calcium carbonate that will build the shell of a bivalve, or the shells. And they are often ridged in such a way that you can see that they've been producing uh, uh, new shell material that get bigger and bigger each year. And the mantle is the organ that is increasing the size of that shell. They do also have a foot that helps them to move around. It can help them burrow or dig. And what else? Oh, these adductor muscles. Yes. So here you can see here's one adductor muscle. Here's another adductor muscle. These are very large muscles, and these are the things that are resisting against you when you find a live clam or mussel or oyster at the beach, and you want to get in, and it says, "No, no, I don't want you inside me. I want to stay closed. I want to protect myself with my valves." So these adductor muscles can be very strong and can hold they can regulate the opening and closing of the valves. So when we eat different bivalves, we're actually eating different parts of the animal, or we're focusing on different parts of the animal. Now, and this shows some of the great diversity within the bivalves and how they don't all have the same function. The reason there are so many different types of bivalves is because there's a lot of different ways to live in these marine habitats and freshwater habitats. So in the case of our edible clam, Maya arenaria, this is a burrowing species. And they burrow using their foot. So the foot helps them to burrow down into the sand. So when you eat a clam, it's got a very pronounced foot, and that's what we eat. We also eat the siphons of these edible clams as well. In the case of oysters, oysters are typically sessile. They stay in one place and they attach in groups. They're quite gregarious to rocks or piers or whatever it is they want to hunker down on. That's what they do. And oysters, when we shuck them and open them up, we usually eat the whole organism, but the majority of it is just the guts and the gonads. But we just kind of slurp it all down there. Scallops, or scallops, as I've been told folks say around here, are modal. They actually swim. And the way that they swim is they actually use their siphons to squirt water, but they also can clap their adductor muscles. So when you eat scallops, usually what you're eating is like a columnar-shaped thing, and that's just the adductor muscle. And it's a very big muscle that's adapted to move those valves back and forth and help it swim along the floor of the ocean. Razor clams, also burrowing, they are very elongate, and they have very pronounced siphons. And so when we eat razor clams, typically what we're just eating are the siphons. That brings us to our fourth and final class of mollusks, which are the Cephalopoda, or the head feet. Cephalopoda include squid, octopus, nautilus, chambered nautilus, and cuttlefish. And the extinct ammonites were also cephalopods. It means head foot, because essentially that's all they are, is a head and a foot. In some lineages, the mantle forms an internal tube for the body, and it might form a structure that stiffens it, called the pen. That's typically found in squids, but not in octopuses. They have arms, and some have tentacles also. So the foot is divided into multiple arms, and but you've probably thought of them as being tentacles, but tentacles are actually a little bit different from the arms. The 8 appendages on an octopus are arms, and a squid has those 8 arms, and it has 2 longer tentacles. So the arms are completely lined with the suckers that they use to attach to and feel, and also use them for reproducing, among other things. But the arms only have the suckers at the apices, at the very ends. So you may have heard that squid have 10 tentacles and octopuses have 8 tentacles, and that's how you tell the difference. There are a few more differences than that, but squid have 8 arms and 2 tentacles, and octopuses truly have 0 tentacles. And then nautiluses and cuttlefish have variable numbers of arms. So of these, the chambered nautilus and the cuttlefish are the ones that most retain having some type of shell. The chambered nautilus has a very gastropod-like shell that's spiral, and the chambered nautilus, one thing that makes it very different from a gastropod is that while you do have that torsion and you do have that calcareous shell that's spiral, is that it actually forms in different chambers. There's actually rooms or discrete units within that shell, and they're connected to each other by a long tube, which the nautilus can, they uses that tube to pump gas into or out of the different chambers, which helps it to regulate its buoyancy. And that tube that runs through all of those chambers is called the siphuncle. So here you can see a chambered nautilus with its shell. Squid, which has its elongate body, its 8 arms and 2 tentacles. Octopus. And I think I'm going to put a video about octopuses in here because they're just so cool.